Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for being here in the new webinar from the Basque Culinary Center called Exploring the Art and Science of Fermentation, a multidimensional perspective. We know that fermentation is just a very, very interesting and biological phenomenon. Loads of different kind of microorganisms converting carbohydrates into food for them. So from the Basque Culinary Center, we tend to think, and that's because it is like that, fermentation means more than a biological phenomenon. It involves culture, it involves history, and also identity. That's the reason why today we would like to share with you different kind of perspectives far beyond the microbiology. That's why we would like to introduce you the speakers for today. All of them, they were master students from our program, the Master in Gastronomic Sciences. Let me introduce you to Nabila Rodríguez, José de la Rosa, and Alessandra Massa. They will explain with their own perspective what it is for them fermentation. And before starting, let me introduce you also to the team that is behind this webinar, and it is behind the master program in gastronomic sciences. Let me introduce you to Lee, Raquel, Costi, and myself, Juan Carlos Arbolella. So we don't want to waste more time. So Nabila, are you there? Nabila Rodríguez, she's working in Alchemist, a restaurant based in Copenhagen, Denmark.
Hello, Juan Carlos. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today, and I'm going to share you a bit more about what is, for me, fermentation. First of all, I would like to introduce a bit more myself. I'm a studied chemist and a chemical engineer, and then I did my master in gastronomic science. And currently I'm doing my PhD as well in gastronomic science at Basque Culinary Center. But at the beginning, for me, I've been working a lot with fermentation and still working with fermentation. From my background, fermentation for me, it was more like from food science perspective. So for me, at the beginning of my introduction for fermentation for me was basically a metabolic process to produce a lot of different kind of molecules in order to produce or develop a tasty and delicious products through the action of enzymes. And also more like a very biochemist, is simple like extraction of energy for carbohydrate without oxygen. But working more in detail about fermentation and how micro work together, I realized that fermentation for food science perspective is not enough. It's very simple to explain a huge and complex process. For me, nowadays, fermentation as well is a culture and social science. Why? Fermentation is a microbial relation between bodies and food products. During the fermentation, when we produce or we made at home, or even for me in the restaurant, when we made a fermentation and some fermented product, we are always exchange a microorganism with the food. It's not normally we clean our hands, but we are our natural microbiome around us. And normally we are always, every single day, we are exchanging a lot of microorganisms between food, between people, and between people. So from gender perspective, or even as a transformation of a society. For me, it's a fermentation as well. Taking from I don't remember the name, Sandoz. When we exchange microorganisms through between us and the fermented product, they're not different between men and women. It's not a particular gender. In fermentation, gender being more a spectrum than binary. Exchange of microorganisms produce a super specific ecosystem and symbiosis between our product and our fermented and us. And it's very special interaction between us and our fermented product. Because of that, we can explain terms like terroir, for example, and using fermentation as a transformation, as a metaphor to explain a lot of different phenomenon that is nowadays concerned a lot about human life. It's super interesting how fermentation, on how fermentation can transform from, for example, wine, from grapes to wine. And through fermentation, we can explain, for example, terroir. Why we can explain terroir? Because it's a symbiosis, an ecosystem that is produced by the person and the product at the end. And that special ecosystem is far away from gender or different kind of people. It's just microbes and humans. So more talking fermentation and using the metaphor of transformation through fermentation, we can explain a lot of things. For example, talking about discipline. For me, very visual discipline is when we inoculate in a plate with a PDA in a petri dish, one single bacteria or fungi, wherever. This is a discipline, but we cannot get that complexity that, for example, while alcoholic fermentation or natural wine, or for example, one kombucha can get us. Then talking about when we mix and we ferment it with some of microorganisms like beer, we use some specific microorganisms to produce such as delicious beverage, for example, drinks. But then just talking about the transformation. When we made kombucha, for example, we think just in the SCOBY. Or for example, when we think about kefir, we think just in the kefir grains. We don't know what is there, who is there, no, it's just we think about the piece of cellulose and we don't know what is inside. And that, or for example, sourdough, for example, that produce, that symbiosis produce a super complexity aroma or flavor profile at the end of the fermentation. So just take and extrapolate that knowledge from transformation of through fermentation in our society, for example, is the way that nowadays I'm understanding fermentation as well. There is a lot of theories and a lot of anthropological studies talking about fermented feminisms or how we can transform society of different problems nowadays through the fermentation, using that knowledge from the fermentation, how microbes can form one food into another one completely different without asking anything. Like, for example, yes, that the perfect example for me always is a kombucha or kefir. We think just about SCOBY or about kefir grain, but we don't know and we don't wonder why, what is inside, who is inside. Just we need to ferment it, just a piece of cellulose, for example. I share with you different reference about fermented feminism, gender, and microbial relationship about fermentation. So that's all, and thank you so much
Thank you, Nabila. So it can be short. Thank you, Nabila. So it is turn now for José de la Rosa. José, I think that you are around.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you everyone for being here. As you just said, I'm José de la Rosa, and I'm the founder of Fermented Freelance. My background is in biology and also gastronomic science. And well, speaking about Fermented Freelance a little bit, it's not just myself. It's thanks to the collaboration with my best friends from the childhood. They are a farmer and also a beekeeper, and they represent their own brands, Parralo and Scones. And with all the raw materials that they produce, Fermented Freelance study, research, rethink, and redesign in order to highlight the hidden value behind this kind of products that we got here in Huelva. No? We come from the south of Spain, border with Portugal. Specifically, we are in the center of the province, and this area is characterized for having poor and dry lands, but still all the biodiversity that grows here grows stronger than ever. And as you know, a nature that is strong is also creating really healthy products. No, so with from this land, we produce a wide range of products, from the fruits, vegetables, seasonal, of course, and other products that are shelf-stable, like olive oil, wine, and of course, from the beekeeper frame, from scones, also wax, pollen, honey, etc. Then Fermented Freelance use all these raw materials in order to create new products. Some of them are intended to be launched within the market, like this vermouth. Okay, we asked also for the design to Master Yellow Pen, that is also from here, from Huelva. And we use the high alcohol wine that we are producing, and we aromatize it using the whole environment that we got around, the whole landscape, right? This is the particular thing about this vermouth. We use not only the final product, but the knowledge that we extract from it. Then what we really do is do lectures, consultancies with restaurants, industry, startups, also educational programs. And this is what we really extract from all this development, from all this research. No, we use the knowledge. It's not only about vermouth. We are also specialized in the management of this specific filamentous malt called Aspergillus, the one that is used for miso, sake, shoyu, etc. And we apply it to local products, from the classical fish garum to gurumelo shoyus. Gurumelos is a local mushroom called in Latin Amanita ponderosa. Also the same with acorns. We do our own miso. Same with pollen. At the end, it's about using foreign techniques and applying it to the local product to turning it into something that is recognizable. No, it's recognizable and familiar to the people, to the customers that we want to reach, right? And well, it's not just about making traditional, in this case, Japanese recipes, but also, why not, to switch microorganisms that has been established in our culture. This pork loin, Iberian pork loin, normally is done by my grandfather spontaneously. In this case, we inoculate the same mold as Aspergillus, and we accelerate the process. It's not about better or worse, it's about rethinking and reshaping. And what we found is that the process get accelerated and having more or less same profile, no same organoleptic profile. If we did it with pork, we thought also, why not to try with tuna? The result was even faster and really pleasant. And of course, we don't cover only this kind of fermentation. We try to cover the whole range, always under the same philosophy, use what is local and shape it into a final product that is recognizable for the people that we want to reach. And we do this because, as I said, Fermented Freelance lives from sharing knowledge to the whole industry. But what I want to bring you today is not only about Fermented Freelance, that is speaking about fermentation and gastronomy. We want to take a step further, and we want to get contaminated from other disciplines. Recently, I wrote this paper that I invite you to read it in calm. You got the link in my bio, the bio of my Instagram profile. Thanks to the collaboration with José Antonio Carrillo, that is a professor in Dubai. He is an architect, and also the founder of Architable. He's expert in artificial intelligence design. We put together biology, architecture, fermentation, gastronomic science, artificial intelligence, and we wanted to extract knowledge, some more new knowledge that would help us to solve current challenges that we are facing. No, for example, the rising temperatures because of climate change. We went to the basics and we said, okay, what there is in common in between fermentation, biology, gastronomy, architecture? What is in common? What we found is that at the end, in architecture, you build buildings, sorry, and you are creating an isolated space, okay, for a specific kind of life. In this case, architecture is for humans, right? You get isolated from the environment and you have a specific temperature and humidity. Same happens with fermentation. We have developed tools like these clay pots, clay jugs, in order to keep specific conditions within it, so to allow the microorganisms life that we want to grow, right? So architecture and fermentation might be somehow the same. What changed is the scale. But then looking around ourselves, we found this example, the Iberian pork slaughterhouses that we got here in Huelva and also a little bit more in the north of Spain. And this kind of big scale architecture was intended since the past for hosting two kinds of scale of life, yeah? Micro and macro, humans and microorganisms. From the upper part, in which you get hotter temperatures, better airflow in order to get dry the meat, and then to the bottom, in which we cure the meat for years, and we need another condition, another kinds of temperatures, humidity, and airflow. And at the same time, in the middle floors, we got the human running their businesses and their own life, because they used to live also in these buildings. So taking this as an example, we started to research in the past, and we found that in desert zones in the planet Earth, there was already used some tools that were related to gastronomy or food or fermentation, like amphora, for example, in order to cool down the inner room of human houses. So our question was, how can we fight the rising temperatures because of the climate change within Iberian pork slaughterhouses by using these passive cooling techniques? Passive cooling techniques that does not require that much energy. Well, we found that even during the present, we are reshaping these techniques. We are improving it, okay, with the technology and the knowledge that we got right now, and make it even more effective. So compacting all this knowledge plus some new technology that require a little amount of energy, we recreate a Iberian pork slaughterhouse that maintain the temperature in the right conditions, even if the temperatures got risen because of the climate change. I'm not gonna stop here much longer. I invite you to read it, but I just want to open your mind in terms of fermentation. Fermentation, as Nabila also said, is interdisciplinary, is multidisciplinary, and is transdisciplinary. So the farther we go, the more we will find new solutions, not that maybe we left in the past. Speaking about contamination, we didn't stop here. I'm not gonna get into detail because this is something that we are running right now, but we are introducing artificial intelligence within the project that we are running, and we wanted to get some inspiration. So we asked the artificial intelligence to have in count the fractal growth pattern that mycelial, like the one from Aspergillus, has, and try to redesign a gastronomic experience from the dish to the environment. No, so I'm gonna show you now a lot of pictures of what came out from this artificial intelligence. This is like a multi-layer and multi-sensorial dish in which we can place different ingredients on, or we can grow different ingredients, yes, in order to have different experiences. Then we had also to think about the cutlery, the furniture. Why not? In this case, until here, you just saw like designs that somehow are inspired by an architect, a biologist, and then we ask to the artificial intelligence, okay, design something that is inspired in mycelial growth. But for us was not enough. And we asked, okay, how would a mold design this same table? Because we wanted to go even further. That's why artificial intelligence in this case is really useful to inspire. And this was the result, right? Maybe it looks not functional for human, but at the same time, if we adapt the human experience because of this somehow mycelial pattern as the mycelial design, we are going to have a different experience, right? So again, this is not a final result. This is about getting inspired and reshape what has been already established. We can go also to inner spaces like these ones. And imagine that right now, for example, we can build this on the main structure in ceramics or clay and make flow, for example, water. So the air that flows through it gets colder. So we are designing, thinking on mold pattern growth, but at the same time, we are applying passive cooling techniques. We are mixing all this knowledge that we just say in the past slides, right? And from here, we go even to the art, no? How can we mix art with all the things that we just say using artificial intelligence? Well, we can make something in between, and we got inspired because of the keys from Gustav Klimt, and we asked to redesign this art by the colors that molds create, right? The idea is to make little pieces that people can lick or kiss. That's why we chose the kiss from Gustav Klimt. And then I incubate it, I leave it for incubation. The microbiota from the people that lick or kiss grows, and then we place it in the right place in order to get a full pattern that looks like the kiss from Gustav Klimt. So again, getting the people closer to this micro world through art, through something that is visual and creates a pleasant experience. I know that this is a lot. If you are going to be in the master the next year, we are going to see each other and we can speak about this in depth. Thank you so much. If you want to see more about this job, you can follow me on Instagram, Fermented Freelance, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Jose. Yeah, for that's for sure. That is maybe too many things, but I mean, it's just like the aim of this webinar. It's just to give a touch of how fermentation can interact in completely different fields. So we were on Earth. Let's go now to the space. Let me introduce you to Alessandra Massa. Alessandra, are you there?
Yes.
She's doing her PhD in, well, something related to the space food, right?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here, and thank you all to be here. My background is from gastronomy, and then thanks to the Master of Gastronomy Science, I have the chance to become a hybrid between gastronomy and science, these two words. And I would like to introduce you today, how can we use fermentation to find sustainable solution on Earth and not only. Let me see if I can. Okay. As everyone knows, food production is one of the biggest contributors to climate change. Let's make a zoom in food. So the world population is growing, so we are producing more food. And one of the most important macronutrients that we are producing that have a bad impact on our environment is animal protein. Because intensive production of animal protein is also causing problems like deforestation, water pollution, soil pollution, and so this is really bad for our environment. This is why we need to find a sustainable alternative that in order to reduce the intensive animal production. And thanks to fermentation, we can have a solution. We have a real solution is to use single cell fermentation to produce fungal mycelium. The mycelium is a network of EPHI that are formed after germination of spores in fungi. Why mycelium? Why could be the solution? Because we can have, with low resources and a lower impact on our environment, we can have around 35% of protein inside of mycelium. It's not just a solution for protein, but we also can have other nutrients as fiber, amino acid, and fat. Even if although we believe this is something new, the first introduction of microprotein in the market, it was in 1993 with corn, and that with the strains Fusarium venenatum that was patented from them. Then when it was free, it opened the doors for other companies to develop products. Until today, that, for example, in USA market, we can find whole cat meat made out of mycelia. There are two ways of producing this mycelium. For example, one could be the liquid state fermentation, and the other one is the solid state fermentation, where we can use even less resources than the first one. In space on Earth, we have a common challenge. We need to find a solution for introducing our body the protein, this macronutrient. Why? Well, in future decades, long duration flight will take around 3 years. This is a long time because when astronauts go on this mission, they need to have enough nutrients for the mission. And one of the main macronutrients they also need is protein, because the lack of that source for a long time can cause health problems. And they also need a source of foods that doesn't occupy space, that it has to be grown there, because they have limited space for storage food. There are already some projects ongoing where they're searching alternatives to develop food on space flight. For example, they are growing plants in order to add like also the value of producing food with astronauts, and also to give the green to them, because they are close in a space flight, so it's also attached with nature. Another project that is really interested, that they are using fermentation technique to introduce food that also can help the microbiota gut of astronauts. And also, like NASA is introducing a lot of space food challenge for companies in order to find a solution for this problem. For example, this is a picture of the chili peppers that they are growing on space flight. Also because astronauts eat foods that has a strong taste, because they lost the mouth, like the taste. The taste is less than here on Earth. And here, for example, there's a picture of an astronaut with a fermentation chamber where they are trying to produce the first mycelium in collaboration with a company from Chicago that is called Naturefine. From this, it's also start another project when we want to introduce the use of mycelium extremophiles in order to give this protein value. Why mycelium extremophile? This is a kind of microorganism that are able to grow in extreme condition. For example, low pH, a high level of salt, or high temperatures. And this also can help to develop safe conditions for foods. For spaceflight, they're not using mycelium just for food, but they're also ongoing a project driven by Lynn Rothschild, where they're using the fermentation of microalgae and mycelium in order to produce structure on space for the long duration spaceflight. And mycelium is not just a solution for food on Earth, but also they are already using it to develop more sustainable materials, like, for example, Balenciaga, that is substituting leather with mycelium, or EcoEdit, that wants to avoid the use of polyester and introduce mycelium in order to substitute. And this was all. Thank you for the attention. I hope you enjoyed.
Thank you, Alessandra. Right. This is basically three kind of topics we wanted to bring you today. I hope you enjoy. I mean, it's maybe too many or too much information, but it would be great now if we can have an open discussion. I mean, it is open discussion also for all the people that you are there. You can just ask any question you want for anyone, Alessandra, José, or Nabila. But let me start with this open discussion, because I mean we could see from a chemist like Nabila talking about or relating fermentation with perspective of gender, right? We could see how a biologist, a fermented freelance like José de la Rosa, can use the fermentation for their own land, making new kind of fermented products and taking care of so nice place like Huelva, but also interacting with disciplines like architecture, looking at those fancy photos that you show us, Jose, and also we could see how Alessandra is working her PhD about mycelium, not again of fermentation, but with a very, very specific application. So I mean, it looks like fermentation is so special, and that's my first question. Why is fermentation so special for you? I don't know who wants to start. Nabila.
Why is fermentation so special for me? Because when I started in this work, for me, it was super interesting how when we start, for example, in order to make tempeh, we start with soy beans, and it's very beany, and after 31 hours, we can get another completely different product and different aroma. I'm very into in fermentation, very into aroma, taste, and generally in flavor. And for me, it was like a wow, who is there? How, even for example, for me, if every single batch about koi, tempeh, kombucha is always different. And for me, there are a lot of questions that I really want to go into, like who is there, why sometimes is like this, and how, why someday can get this profile and another day another completely different profile. And reading about fermentation and reading about I'm very into as well about the community around the microorganism, because even if we inoculate, for example, to make koi with Aspergillus oryzae, of course, in the environment, there are a lot of different microorganisms and work together to produce that amazing product at the end. That means koi, and then we can prepare miso. So for me, that is super interesting how, even if we don't know what is going on there, we always use fermentation to produce amazing product. So for me, and we can use fermentation for everything. Like Alexandra said, there is using fermentation in order to produce sustainable clothes, for example, because it's another industry very, very, it produces a lot of pollution. So it's amazing how fermentation can use it in a lot of different ways. And also, from my perspective of gender and transformation, how fermentation, we can use that metaphor of fermentation, of transformation, in order to think about a lot of different problems that nowadays is concerned on the planet. So that's the reason for me fermentation is amazing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it just last summer in July, we had a conference from sociology field that we have been invited, José de la Rosa too, and I think that you also, Nabila. But I mean, the topic of the conference was politics related to fermentation. So there are so many things we can relate. Jose, I don't know why it's so special for you, the fermentation.
Well, it's an interesting question. If we think about fermentation as the way human has been managing microorganisms' life, during the history. If we think only about that, because fermentation is much more, we need to understand that we have been doing that for thousands of years without knowing science, without having that tool to learn from it, to understand what was going on. It was an act of faith. So now that we have that tool, science, in order to understand, we don't know anything. If I'm passionate about fermentation, it's because I still not knowing anything about fermentation. There are many things to discover yet that we did in the past, that we had in control, without knowing anything, without knowing even less, no? So every time I get contaminated from other disciplines, we see that actually fermentation can be a study from architecture or from art or from the politics and the things that we can learn from it goes farther from the culinary application for only gastronomy, no? So that's the thing that makes me fall in love, no, with fermentation. The fact that it's something that is on trend now, it's really trendy, but it has been with us for thousands of years, and still we do not know anything about it. There are many things to be discovered yet, contaminating all other disciplines.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, maybe if we think about restaurants, Alessandra, they have been working maybe a decade, 10 years ago. They started to be obsessed with fermentation. So I suppose that, Alessandra, you had that interest from so many time ago, but I'm keeping the same question. Why is it that special for you?
For me, for example, when I used to work in restaurants, it was the first touch that I had with science, for example, because, for example, we had like products that then it get bad. So I was saying, okay, but why? What is happening? And then it's also that a technique that we can use to extend the shelf life of this same product. So for me, it's important because it's something that makes you formulate question to yourself or to the environment, like what is happening, and it's also something that with really few resources, it can change a lot a product and introduce amazing flavor, unique flavor to a product. So for me, it's important because it's like a magic for foods, if we can say like this.
Okay, I have a question from the audience for you, Alessandra, and it's about growing proteins in space and other products we can develop from fungi world, which is mostly vegetarian. Do you think gastronomy in the future is about to become plant-based?
On my opinion, the future, it would be sad if we eliminated animals protein, and because it takes part of our culture. But the thing is that the future, it has to become more conscientiated about what we eat. And if we introduce other alternatives to protein, maybe like the intensive production of meat will get like lower. So we have the balance between sustainability and eat this kind like animal protein. But I think that the future, it will not to be 100% avoid meat, because it's also will be sad to delay all the culture that there's around eating meat. But we have to decrease the consumption. Yeah, this is my opinion.
Juan, can I jump into the question? Yeah. I think that is one of the goals. I mean, with the fermentation, one of the most interesting part during the fermentation is the reduction of a lot of aroma from grains. And for example, if we think about soy sauce or miso, everything is plant-based. So I think one of the most interesting parts using fermentation is to produce, and during the fermentation as well, we produce a lot of available proteins, and we increase even the concentration of protein during a lot of reactions through the fermentation. So I think That is the main goal, to use fermentation in order to establish and develop delicious product for the future.
You can talk, Jose, too, if you want. If you want to give your opinion, that I'm sure that you.
No, I follow my colleagues. I mean, they're totally right, and at the same time, all those advantages that fermentation creates in terms of organoleptic profile, especially also umaminess, no, connects with the part of our brain that is ancestral, no, that say to us, I want more, because at the end, proteins means a lot for our body. It's a really expensive molecule. And if we somehow have that need to meet, is because of that, because of the protein. So if we can cover that sensation with the job that Nabila and Alessandra are doing, with the benefits that fermentation brings in terms of that sensation, well, we are somehow covering that need. No, we are covering that nostalgia sensation if we start to reduce the meat consumption. It's not about eliminating. I think that it's also about having the right balance. So if we can cover that sensation using these techniques like fermentation that highlight those same profiles, I think that is great. So yeah, totally on the same line.
Nice. Great. I had some questions for myself, but I think that there are some questions from the audience. So I think that Nabila, there is one for you. I read it related to artisanal cheese production. Usually women are in charge, and the traditional give reason is that working with animals and milking process are hard. That's why men are in charge of that part. Could be that gender could have an effect on cheese quality based in the microbiota in the hand of a woman instead men.
First of all, there are a lot of women nowadays doing that work. That is the first thing. But also, I think actually last week I was in a conference where a scientist was explaining about the interaction between humans, about the interaction between microorganisms between humans. And for example, they say that between people, when you are with your partner at home, you are changing a lot of microorganisms. So in my opinion, because I don't have data, in my opinion, they're not different because there is a community of symbiosis between a lot of microorganisms in that region or in that place. So yes, it's the same when we talk about terroir in wine. It doesn't matter if it's a woman or a man. At the end, it's a specific profile that is developing because of that interaction between years and years of microorganisms involved of that, and it's very established ecosystem in that place. So that is my opinion.
Thank you. All right. We have a question for all of you. Fermentation needs a lot of time to happen. How do you organize your experiments developing food products? You three guys develop fermented food. So what can you say about it? Alessandra?
I can start. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Nabila, you go ahead.
Okay. In general, develop a product take time. It doesn't matter if a fermentation or not. And also, the time of the fermentation change a lot. It depends on if you want to get different kind of profile. If you want to get, you play around the temperature and you play around a lot of different parameters. So take time. Yes, how we can, in general, research take a lot of time, and all the experiments need a lot of time. So I don't think fermentation or using fermentation in order to develop a lot of different products is a extra problem of regarding time. So it's depend of what do you want to achieve at the end, and what is your goal, especially in the aromatic profile during the fermentation process. But in general, develop a product take so much time.
Great. Anyone? Do you want to add anything, Jose or Alessandra?
Right. For example, I agree with Nabila that in general, I think every kind of product development takes time. And for example, if we think in a fermented foods that takes time, it's wine. Yeah, wine takes a lot of times to become from grape to wine, but even if that, we have a lot of wine in our market or yes, so I think that time is just you have to manage, but it's not like a problem.
Yeah, maybe microorganisms are giving us a message that it just calm down. It doesn't matter if it takes time. It will be good. And talking about good food, Jose, there are some people say, well, some a person saying, I would like to know some tips to make the taste of my drink less sour and to enhance the flavor of the fruit itself.
Okay, which kind of drink? Drink in general to make it
I
less.
don't know. It just say a drink.
Okay, that's a difficult question to answer, but I don't know if it's something related to sourness production. I don't know, lactic fermentation, acetic fermentation, kombucha, for example. It's again, I think that the answer is about time, about the amount of food that you are giving also to that kombucha. If we are speaking about kombucha, the temperature, all these parameters influence the final sourness. Again, I'm inventing it. I don't know which kind of drink are you saying, are you asking about? But if it's kombucha, the longer you leave it, also the more sugar you add, at the end is more food for them. They are going to transform it in the acetic acid. I'm answering in a really simple and basic way. I don't know exactly how to answer to that. And then to highlight the flavor, I understood in your food, your normal cooking. Well, fermentation is clear to be a nice ingredient, no, for doing that. Any kind of fermented product that we add in our daily routine, in our diet, at different levels. There are some preparations that are more for sweets, that are more delayed, are more for I don't know, for dinner, but salty dishes, drinks, whatever in whatever dish you add it is gonna highlight, no, somehow. So yes, I don't know if I answered.
All right. Well, I mean, anyway, I think that they can. I mean, if there is any other question, we can just respond. We can answer the questions after the webinar if you are interested in this kind of topic. I have another question from the audience that I really like it, and it's just for all of you. Could fermentation be used in the near future to help solving hunger in the world? Who wants to answer? Alessandra.
Right.
And by the way, you can answer that question, but you can answer another one, which is, do you know protein digestibility percentage for mycelia protein? I think that they can be related.
For the first question, I think that resolving hunger is like a good challenge, a big challenge, but I think, of course, that fermentation, it would help with this also, because nowadays we have a lot of foods or vegetable or things in the nature that we don't eat, we don't get to eat. So maybe also with fermentation we can get it more eatable. We can use this technique to arrive to other foods and introduce it in our market. And also, for food waste, thanks to the fermentation, we can reduce it and we can develop new foods starting from the food that we throw. So this could be solution for helping the hunger. And right. For the other question, which was the other question?
Because do you know protein digestibility percentage for mycelia protein? For a specific one?
I don't know like exactly the answer. Yes. So I will, but if you can get in touch, I will look it for answer better.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, do you think that it could be solved when the hunger in the world, fermentation, Jose?
Well, I think that again is a nice technique to in this case preserve food somehow is one of the benefits that can bring. So whatever you can take from one season and keep it safe and delicious for longer, it's somehow enriching. No, your diet is somehow enriching the wardrobe in your house is somehow keeping the raw materials that you got in your environment for longer. So yes, could be. I don't want to, and in my brain, if I have to sell fermentation, I would say yes, it can. But I don't want to, assume it 100%. So this is one of the benefits it might bring. Preservation, it has been always there, linked to fermentation. But well, I will leave also maybe Nabila to answer to that.
Go ahead, Nabila.
Just follow Jose and Alessandra. For me, and it's a dream that we can achieve that in the future. But nowadays, a lot of countries is using fermentation to produce a protein in a cheap way. For example, one of it is tempeh. Or for example, another one in Indonesia with neuroonchon, with some specific microorganism that they use okara, or even the leftover from different kind of beverage in order to, because that is fiber, and through the fermentation they can get a lot of protein. So this is a conservation, and also is a health way to use bioproduct and to create yes, like for example protein from like okara that is nowadays is a huge waste around the world. So I think it can be. I mean, it's in my dream. I would like and I would love. But yes, there are a lot of different places around the world that are using fermentation in order to get nutrients.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Nabila. Thank you all. We are running out of time. I think that we have time for another question. It's because I think that fermentation nowadays, especially in the restaurants, is just kind of it's a good link between the tradition and the future. I think that all the questions are related in a way. We start studying kind of very traditional fermentation processes using different kind of materials and trying to think about the future of the food. There is a question, Jose, especially for you, but I think that it could be an open question for all of you, is what do you think about that a lot of old civilizations, they were drying meat with heat sun, and this is a simple example. Can we replicate this in our home? Could be a good solution to stop food waste.
Well, it's not only about, well, the answer is yes, but it's not only about meat. In Italy, we can find the sun-dried tomatoes, for example, many products that, if you are asking this because of the safetiness, no, from the process, at the end, in the case of the meat, everything has been marinated before in salt. So we are already reducing the chances for other pathogens to grow and to create problems. And from that, if the sun in the region you are doing it is strong enough, there shouldn't be any problem. It's as at the end what we are doing with the cured sausages or with Iberian jamon ibérico. It's more or less the same. We put it in salt. We create an environment that is really high in salt. So we manage the growth of the microorganisms that we want and not the rest. From that, we can just hold it from the ceiling, leave it in the sun. The answer is yes, but my advice is if you are getting within the fermentation world right now. If you don't know a lot about it, meat, animal proteins is the last thing that I would advise you to start. Yes, because could be more compromised and more contaminated from pathogens that are a bit risky if you don't know a lot. But yes, the sun, and if we speak, sorry, but I'm going to continue because lately I have been studying in depth about this. For example, garum is a technique that has been spread all around Europe. And we got recipes from north areas and south areas, so completely different weather. Here in the south, there are some recipes that use concrete tanks, and they pour the mix of fish and salt there, no water, no anything else, nothing, and leave it in the sun. Because the sun during the summer was that high that is preventing the surface to get contaminated. The rest of the volume is okay because it's with high amount of salt. So yeah, it depends also on your region. If you are going to do it in a cold weather, I wouldn't advise you to do that. In the north, recipes of garum, they used to do it in cellars, hidden, covered, different conditions. So yes and no at the same time.
Okay, thank you so much, Jose. I think that it's time. It's 4 o'clock already. Well, here at least in the peninsula, in San Sebastian. But I would like just to, Nabila and Alessandra, just finish with a sentence. Some conclusions for you about this kind of interaction of fermentation with so many topics. Do you want to start?
Just one sentence about fermentation. I think it's very important to use different disciplines in order to understand fermentation, because as a good wine is super complex if you want to explain from just one discipline, from, for example, from biology perspective. So I think the interaction between disciplines is so important to understand the fermentation process.
Thank you, Nabila. And you, Alessandra? Yes, a sentence.
I think that we are on our way to use fermentation to understand more our environment. Is the discipline that helps us to get more in touch with nature, like also work together with nature. So yeah, I think that we have to use the base that we have to do more with this technique also for our environment.
Thank you so much, Alessandra. Jose, just one sentence. That's difficult for you, I know.
Well, following what my colleagues just said, fermentation is related to microorganisms, and microorganisms has colonized most of the environments that we can see around. So that means that they got adapted along the evolution to all kinds of conditions. This means a lot to us. We are really specific animals, mammals, and everything we get from that micro world, and we apply into our life, in the way we work, in the way we live, in the way we walk, in the way we build, might bring many benefits. So let's stay curious about microorganisms.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you very much. We need to mix more disciplines to understand much better the fermentation. Maybe understanding much better the fermentation could understand much better ourselves. All right. Thank you so much, Nabila, Jose, Alessandra. It has been a great pleasure. And it has been a great pleasure just to be here and to have this kind of really interesting discussion. I hope that all the audience may find this open discussion and all the topics we mentioned today interesting too. Okay, bye-bye. Have a nice day.